Yassas. What happens when you take two vibrant brothers that are descendants from the Greeks in Constantinople, embracing their American roots, and then ask them to serve up rich tales of traditions, cuisine, childhood memories, and a hearty dose of humor? You're about to find out. This is Baklava and Banter, your passport to all things Greek. Here we are again. One of the things I didn't...
Petraki,
And I'm Soto.
and welcome to Baklava and Banter.
Yes, sir. So one of the things I didn't mention in, if you listen to the last episode, we were talking about kind of what we're all about. Is one of the segments that we wanted to do here was sort of a word of the day. But these are English words that might get slightly mispronounced in their usage. We grew up with a whole lot of them, especially, again, parents and grandparents and so forth, where English was a third language at best, if it was one of the languages that I would say they really spoke. And so to kick that off today, I'm going to throw out the word Jeep patata, and I will let you use it in a sentence and talk about it.
First, Jeep patata is a noun for all those spelling bee people out there.
Right.
And my sentence is this. I went to 7-Eleven today and I bought a bag of Jeep patata. Sour cream and onion flavor, but they did have barbecue as well.
Right.
So for those of you who haven't figured it out, Jeep patata, Jeep like the car Jeep, Jepp, is a potato chip. So when you have immigrant grandparents who've learned all their English watching Wheel of Fortune
and soap operas.
Yep. Days of Our Lives and General Hospital to be exact. Jeep patata is potato chips. So that is our word for the day. And as we do these programs, we'll have, may not be episode, but we will have a word of the day for that specific episode. Now, for those of you who grew up, no matter, like there's Spanglish, there's Greekish, if you want to call it that, but every language has that. So it doesn't have to be Greek. If you've grown up and you have these words, feel free to send them to us and we'll talk about them on the air.
Yeah, they those words are the gifts that keep on giving. I think a lot of times intentionally we will call words like potato chips Jeep patatas.
But the funny thing is about that is even if you went out socially with a bunch of Greeks and their elder, everybody used the words. Right. It's like you understood what everybody is saying. It wasn't just not your relatives. Everybody used the words. Everybody spoke the same language.
Right. Yeah. It was a side language that that everybody understood. So that was easy to comprehend. Let's talk about traveling as a Greek American. You've traveled more recently to Greece, for example, and I think it's interesting because I think one of the dynamics that's neat is and we talked earlier on the first episode about this sense of community when you go anywhere where there's a large population of Greeks, and I think now we're at the point that unless we give somebody our name or we say something that is Greek, where because we know how to pronounce it, it comes out correctly, which gets somebody to think maybe they speak Greek. Normally, somebody wouldn't say, "Oh, you're Greek." If anything, for me, they always think I'm Italian. So now you're in somewhere where, whether you go to Greece, somewhere where there's Greeks, and there's an interesting dynamic because when somebody becomes curious and they ask questions, then they realize that you're Greek. It's, as you like to say, up.
Yeah, exactly.
All of a sudden, your family, and that's not your family.
Yeah.
You saw that dynamic a lot in Greece, correct?
Yeah, yeah, you see it all the time, and I go there and they think I'm some wasp from Middle America,
Right.
and then all of a sudden they find out I speak Greek, and they'll ask where you're from, and then you know they'll find out you tell them your family's from Constantinople, and that kind of elevates thing to a whole different level, just because for generations, for millennia, anybody from Constantinople was viewed as aristocratic.
Aristocracy. Yeah.
Yeah, just because of the level of money that was in that port, for all practical sense, and everybody was rich and educated. So then that gets another conversation started. I had a guy, we were in Santorini at the time, and they found out that I'm Greek, and they asked where in the U.S. And these guys were really humorous because all of a sudden they're like, "You're speaking Greek, but they want to speak English." They're like, "Oh, where are you from?" New Jersey. And the guy goes, "Oh, the Garden State." It's just like it's kind of funny. But
Yeah.
then the owner of the guy, who we didn't find out, his name is Alexandros something. I don't remember his last name. But when you look at his pamphlet, like, he was like the jeweler to the stars, and everything was handmade. 18, 22 karat jewelry.
Yeah.
And then he finds out you're Greek, and he's like, "Oh," and some of these pieces were like ridiculously priced, right? And he says to me in Greek, "Oh," he goes, "Oh, I'm gonna treat you like you're my nephew." So he shows me she was looking at two pieces, and I think together they were like $14,000 together, like US. And he goes, "Oh, I'm gonna give you a deal," and it was like $8,500. And I told him in Greek, I need to call my aunt because my uncle's trying to rob me. And we had a good laugh over that. It's just those things, but they were,
Yeah.
it's just a different level. There's a sense of camaraderie that we may live worlds apart, but our bloodlines, it what makes everybody family. It's something that you'll never ever see here. I've never encountered that in the US. I mean, we have Southern charm here, Midwest charm, which are very nice, very polite, but not to this level that I experienced it. It was actually kind of nice to see in a way, because then you can hear the conversations, because you can play both sides of the game. You can hear the conversation they're having with Americans who are there with a cruise ship. They're there with whatever, like Norwegian or the Princess lines, and they come in, they're all Americans, and they're bright eyed and bushy tails, and what do you think, Tim? Do you think I should buy this? It's beautiful. It's beautiful. you know and then
Yeah.
they're talking about them behind their back, as most all Greeks do, and you're just kind of in the corner chuckling. you know I
Right.
mean, talking about traveling, like, just real quick, we were in Paris once, and not a fan of the food in Paris, like, not my favorite place. Just, and we were looking for a place to go eat, and we just happened to find this Greek restaurant that the owner was from Mykonos, I think it was, or and we're like, found the address, and it was down this side alley,
Yeah.
and we walked in, and we sat down, and you could hear them all talking. They're all Greek. And so I started ordering in the Greek. The guy stopped. He goes, asks me, in Greek, is asking me, "You're Greek?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And again, asks where you're from, and I told him, and he's like, "Oh," and all of a sudden, like, we didn't order food. Food just started coming to the table. Like, I'm just like, "Okay, well, thank you," you know. And then they
Yeah.
thanked us, because listen, think about it. Who from the US is going to go to Paris
And then
to
go to
go
Greek.
eat at a Greek restaurant?
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? It was just one of
Right.
those things, like, it was like it was my lucky day, you
Well,
know?
like I said, that's where I remember being in um a fine dining Greek restaurant in New York City years ago with somebody that I worked with, and when we did the ordering, I said I'll go ahead and order, and so we ordered. Went through appetizers. We got through the main course and so forth, and so we were about to order dessert, and I could hear that all the servers were actually Greek. I actually heard them speaking in the back and so
Mhm.
forth, and So our waiter came over and he gave us the dessert menu, and he said, by the way, are you Greek? I said, I am. He said, do you speak Greek? I go, I do. And then he switches to Greek and he goes, Θέλετε καφεδάκι? Do you want some coffee? And we ordered, they had like, galato burrico. They had, I forgot what else they had, but they had like six
Galactic
desserts.
booty. Galactic booty is delicious.
Right. Also, by the way, word of the day, one of the mispronunciation. Well, I don't know if I think it was intentional,
Yeah, I
but
think it's intentional.
somebody pronouncing pronouncing galato burrico as galactic booty. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we ordered like two desserts, and to your point, all of a sudden, one dessert, two dessert, three dessert. I'm like, and initially, I'm like, we didn't order on the house, and they brought us
Yeah.
coffee and the whole thing. And so the person I'm with, he was a big guy, former drill instructor, 6'7". He couldn't obviously understand the what the server was saying. So at one point, he when he initially came over and spoke to me in Greek, he said, what did he just say? I said, well, I don't know if I should tell you this, but he's like, hey, when is the big guy sitting next to you going to stop eating? We don't have that much food in the back. But yeah, I mean, I remember going to a place growing up that I hadn't been before. That was the little place, the corner in Morristown that had the little gyro shop with the guy who looked like Albert Einstein. Remember that? That was on the right.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So you're
Yeah.
talking that's on Washington Street, I think it was.
Yeah, well, it used to be. I remember
Yeah.
going in there for the first time,
Yeah.
and I place my order. Again, I place it in English, and the guy starts a conversation with me, and it got to, where you're from and so forth. And all of a sudden he started to catch on. And the first question he asked when he figured out I was Greek is, where are you from? And basically was trying to figure out who my family is, because everything is connections.
Yeah.
And so our grandfather was best friends with somebody who owned a catering wedding hall,
Mm-hmm.
who then knew a bunch of people because the industry he was in, he met all kinds of people. And so it was interesting to make those connections, and by virtue of that, you may never have met this person, and you may be, what is it, 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, whatever that they say,
6 degrees of
6
separation.
degrees of Kevin Bacon,
Yeah.
and you would think that you were their closest relative. I mean, it's just,
Well,
and it's still a dynamic that I appreciate.
well, I think part of that is that when you look at population size of Greece,
Yeah,
there's more people living in Manhattan than live in all of Greece.
yeah.
There's only 11. The population of Greece is only 11 million people. So the
Really,
likelihood of you, what's that?
it's only 11 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you think about the probability of you knowing somebody or being related to somebody,
Yeah.
are a lot higher
Right.
than in the U.S.
Yeah.
I think we have like what 300 million people in the U.S.
Yeah. 330, I
So
think.
when you think about it that way, there's a highly probability, that you're an uncle, you're like a second cousin, at least a second or a third cousin. You know,
Right. Right.
so that's the crazy part right there. So
So speaking of, well, I guess it's not just in Greece but here as well. What's the deal with the whole Coke versus Pepsi when you go
uh,
into there's no Coke, right? It's always Pepsi. I mean, there's the Saturday Night Live spoof, cheeseburger, no Coke, Pepsi, but that's true, right?
absolutely true. Because at least in New York City, at least for the longest time now, that you'd go into like a shop that had Yiddo or like a Greek restaurant or something like that, and it'd always be no Coke, Pepsi. You know what I mean? And that's
Yeah,
the skit that they made out of it. But there's some truth to be said in that, and I think that's because these guys who came over started these restaurants. Pepsi made inroads into Europe before Coca-Cola had the supply line in there. So I think that's why now, even to this day, you go into a lot of diners. Now, when we talk about diners, we're not talking about Denny's. Okay, we're not talking about Cracker
we're not talking
Barrel.
about America's diner,
Yeah, we're talking about East Coast, Northeast, New York City metropolitan area diners,
right?
where they have their menus are the size of a map book, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
where they serve all three courses, and you know, I think like disco fries, gravy with cheese, with fries with gravy and cheese on them. Like,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, was it some Greek that invented it and been like, I love disco, you know, and just need them disco fries,
Yeah.
But with COVID, these are the places that would be opened up all night, and
Yeah.
especially growing up where we were, 2 o'clock in the morning, the places would be packed.
But
Especially
there's,
if you had a night out on the drinking, you're gonna go and
oh yeah.
have the munchies. You're gonna hang out there.
Yeah. And there's operating that kind of business is in the DNA, I think, of Greeks. Because to your point, I mean, all of the, and we've known and know a couple of owners of diners in New Jersey in particular. And if you talk to all of them, it's some combination of, if the original owner's still alive, he got a job as a dishwasher
Yeah,
and then stayed along long enough for whoever owned it before and decided to sell it, he bought it. Or there are some cases where there's the next generation of Greeks who have taken over the diner. But there's something about it because yes, it isn't like there isn't authentic diners like that in other parts of the country. As a matter of fact, the interesting thing is when you watch shows like um, Diners, Drives, and Dives that Guy Fieri does. In his shows, he's been like in, I don't know, I'm Minnesota, Oregon, and he stops by a diner, and you look at the outside of the diner and you goes, that looks like a diner we'd see in the East Coast, and he goes in, and lo and behold, it's a Greek family that owns it, where they actually either purchased an original diner and restored it, or opened up an actual diner with the same menu and everything else. And so it operates the same way. It's got the same menu. It's got that expediency where you can order almost anything. There's almost no prep in the kitchen. The short order cooks and the way that they operate is just seems to be amazing. Um, but there's something in the DNA. I can tell you, having lived up in New England, where they have the House of Pizza that are run by Greeks, Greeks should stay out of the pizza business. Right?
well,
Just stick to diners, because in that particular case, that wasn't very good pizza. But I'm also biased, having grown up in New
you
Jersey.
got to remember in New England, that McDonald's was also serving pizzas in the '90s, so
Well, that's true.
they had the
That's true.
McPizza, which went by the wayside. The McRib should have gone by the wayside too. So, but thank God that's finally gone.
Did you ever go into a McDonald's when you were in Greece?
No, Italy.
Oh, well, I was
Amazing
just
experience. Amazing experience. Best McDonald's experience I've ever had. So here we have the McCafes, right? McCafes to talk about.
right.
Um, you get the coffee in there. Actually, you go into McDonald's, and this was in Milan, it was across the plaza from the Duomo, the cathedral there.
Right.
And you walk in there, and it's funny. You order by kiosk, okay, and it gives you a number, and you see, and then you just wait. They'll call your number on to give you the food. But the McCafe in there, every freaking homemade Italian dessert you can imagine. They actually were making fresh cappuccino, espressos in there.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It would probably rival some of the best Italian bakeries in the US, but I'm sure it was better than that,
Well,
you
as I'm
know?
saying, it'd be neat if that was the case in Greece, and you walked in and you're like, I will have the Big Mac and a piece of the fresh galatoburgo, or the
You know, you got to remember each country has its own little specialty, you know what I mean?
right, right, exactly,
Especially in their breakfast menu. So,
right.
those are the things I probably get, but I'm going to tell you that Big Mac I had in Milan, oh my God. It was like freaking Ronald McDonald and the hamburgers were back there cooking it themselves. It was really good.
Yeah,
Like if you had just given me that and didn't tell me where it came from, I would have been like it was in the US,
yeah.
you know? But yeah, I mean, those are all that's what makes traveling so fun, I think. because you get to kind of like do a compare and contrast.
Yeah. I just thought of another great story that's a combination of food and that sense of belonging to the tribe, right? Being Greek. Um, the our landlord that had the train station
Oh,
cafe.
so yeah, we had moved down to Central
Southern,
Jersey.
actually, yeah,
It was
technically
Central Jersey
central. Yeah, yeah,
for about a year and a half,
yeah. 2 years.
and the house we were actually very close to Staten Island. You could
Right.
kind of see Staten Island and smell the garbage coming across the waterway.
You could see the Statue of Liberty too when you went down to the water.
Yeah, you have to kind of peek
Remember, it was
around the
right there.
corner
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
But this guy owned a hot dog stand.
Right. He was the landlord.
Yeah, and he owned a hot dog stand.
Right.
So at any given time, a lot of times he would pick us up and he would take us there and bring us back. That's happened a lot too. And we'd walk in there, they let us go inside, we'd make our own hot dogs, eat,
Yeah.
and then he'd bring us back home.
But this was it was at a train stop. I think
Yeah.
that was like I think that was where they would do tickets or something, right? Originally?
No, I think back in the day, I think that was where, because remember, the platform was down below.
Right.
So I think back in the day, I think that was where I think they were like checking when you were, when I say back in the day, I mean like early 20th century,
Right.
like early 1900s. I think that's where like trucks would pull up and they would check for like cargo and like,
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
because I'm pretty sure back then it was probably like some sort of pulley system that would take packages down both so they can load them up. But we would go in there and it'd be like
Yeah.
we were
It
like
was
kids
like
in a candy
have at
store.
it. It was
Yeah,
but it would have but to your point, it would have the windows, the wooden panels would open up to the street so you could
yeah,
walk up.
yeah.
But again, he was our landlord. We didn't know him prior to moving there. I don't think we had any family connections,
No,
and he got to know us. And I can't tell you how often we were there. We would. I mean, it was the best thing in the world. It's like I'm going to go ahead and eat cheeseburgers all
yeah.
afternoon.
It was cheese, and it was like old school, dripping down your hand type of cheeseburgers. Like this was like, oh, when you didn't worry, it was time when you didn't have to worry about what additives were in the meat. It was probably like fat. It was like I don't know, 95%, 5% fat. No, no, no. It was 5%. No, it was probably like a good like 15% fat. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But it was like amazing.
yeah, yeah.
Which
We would
then,
also.
go ahead.
Yeah. No, no, finish.
No, I was gonna say, which brings me back to what to Rutt's Hut, which is in Clifton,
Ah,
New Jersey, right off of Route 3 near the Meadowlands. This place for the last 6, 7 years has been rated the best hot dog in the U.S.
yeah.
So what's wrong? Like you can't go wrong with a Thuman's hot dog deep fried until it rips open. That's why they call them rippers. And then you can get, they have a delicious German relish you can put on it. Just flavor explosion in your mouth.
And
You know,
is that still owned by Greeks?
it's owned by Greeks. You go in there,
Yeah, another perfect
you
example. Yeah.
you say hello to them. Oh, you speak Greek. Now they do not give you a discount of any sort. They're just happy that you're there. You know,
Yeah,
so but old
yeah.
school. These are roadside These are roadside places that were built early 20th century that stand the test of time. You know. Now
Yeah,
I don't know if it's owned by Greeks, but another place like that is in White Manor to
right.
get your
In
sliders. Yeah,
Hackensack, New
yeah.
Jersey.
It's it's actually Hackensack, yeah. And there's one in Jersey City, but people say there's no relationship between the two. But another delicious places. Now, if these places see this and they want to offer us free samples, by all means, do, because we have no problem in turning down food. We will never turn down food,
Yeah.
you know?
In hindsight, you talk about food, and I think I've mentioned this to Mom a couple of times, only because I came to the realization after. And I don't live on the East Coast anymore. I live in the Southwest. So some of the things that you're talking about, we have fantastic Mexican food, but we don't
Yeah,
have quite that.
tacolitas.
And I realized at one point that instead of the obviously different times, that we should have opened up a bakery, because with the way that Mom, when she was younger, with the way that she cooks and the volume and the reaction that people have when she cooks, I'm thinking, man, that would have been
I think yes and no, because if you've ever noticed, there is a lot of her things she does or is there's no real recipe. It's just kind of
yes,
thing.
exactly. I know,
So I
because we've
don't
tried to get
think
recipes out of her
not
for
don't
years.
and not that they were bad. It was just
Right.
like if you came in on a week one
Yeah.
and you came back week three, you'll get the same product, but it wasn't exactly the same thing. There
Yeah.
was, if you were doing statistic, the p value on this would be there's a lot of variability within the recipe just because she may have forgotten to add something that she added the week before, but you know
The
people are
funny
trying
thing
to,
is
there's
that,
some people out there that are like, it's not quite the same as I remember it 2 weeks ago.
but the funny thing is she knows when she thinks it's off, and she'll test you, right?
uh
How many people that you'll give you something, you go, what do you think about that? And a lot of people, and again, because even let me just clarify something that you said. Even if she may tweak it a little bit, compared to somebody else's or something else,
oh yeah, it's
to a lot of
always
people, it's still, this
top
thing is
notch.
top notch, right?
It's always top
So,
notch, yeah.
but she'll, it's funny when she knows something is off, because you'll hear her say over here, oh, I think I didn't do whatever. And then she purposely will ask somebody who hasn't been in that conversation, what do you think of this? And the person go, oh, this is the best I've ever had. And she goes,
Yeah,
you're lying.
yeah,
She actually appreciated when somebody goes, what were you, did you forget something in
yeah,
this? And she's actually,
yeah. I kind of experienced that a couple of weeks ago when she made a cheesecake.
yeah.
And she tells you, oh, I'm getting too old to cook. Look at this cheesecake. She was blaming everything from from the from the cream cheese to the oven. And then week later, she's like, oh, I made it again and it came out fine and I used the same recipe.
Yeah.
I said, so what went wrong? Oh, I left it in the oven too long. Well, then, it wasn't the oven's fault. Recipe was okay. Oh shit!
Yeah.
I hope she doesn't see this. I'm screwed.
I'm sure she will.
Yeah, at some point.
Our mother, by the way, I mentioned, I think in the first episode, a little bit about, coming to this country, learning English as a third language. Then she starts, work. My father worked multiple jobs, and she started getting more jobs, and then opened up the business and so forth. Well, part of what transpired is she became a Class A personality, and for business, and certainly if you're a woman, especially when she started, you got to be as tough as anybody out there. And to her credit, not only did she really establish what is or has been called the American dream. Remember, the first fancy car she wanted to buy was a Cadillac when
Yeah, I
when
mean,
she
she
actually
eventually
made
got
money.
it. I
She
mean,
she did. She eventually got it, but
but
she became this Class A personality that, given the day, I think we've figured out through the years how to work through without getting into arguments, because sometimes it's easy, but it's like I said, it's when my Big Fat Greek Wedding came out, we're looking at each other going, oh my god,
oh yeah.
this is genius.
The funny thing is, we talk about we talk about the late 70s, especially the early 80s, probably like, well,
Yeah,
79 to like 82 were rough economically, not only in the country but on us,
yeah,
because there were some things they couldn't do because they had to wait the 10-year period so they can actually file for citizenship.
Right.
But you have to remember, like we went 1984. We got the brand new Buick, whatever it was, right?
No,
Oh, no, it was
84,
a
we got the
Pontiac,
brand new
Bonneville,
Pontiac,
the
Pontiac Parisian, the
Bonneville,
Bonneville,
right?
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
So you got to think back in the day, that car was like $13,000. I mean, it's like $40,000 car. So
yeah,
you see, like the transition of 5 years. I mean, you look at the geopolitical of the U.S. at the time. How the economy was hitting rock bottom by the time '84 came in. You know, the country exploded. So economically, that is. You
right,
know, I mean, Germany was still burning. Anything across on the eastern side of that wall was,
right.
you know, dots no more.
Yeah, and before we had that, some of the other cars we had in the 70s, we lived through that
Yeah,
whole gas crises, right? It
yeah.
was, remember, Dad had a straight six, which he
Chevy
loved.
Nova.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, but the other thing is because Dad was mechanic, that I think he ended up driving that station wagon that we bought in '84. It had over 300,000 miles on it.
yeah, yeah,
And so, I mean, it was efficient use of what you had available.
yeah.
But anyhow, looks like our time is up, unfortunately, for another episode. Um, I hope once again you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you comment. What did I miss?
I think that's about it. Only thing left to say is I'm Petraki,
And I'm Soto.
and
Yasas.
you've been listening to Banter with Baklava or Baklava and Banter, depending if you've been drinking. And I haven't. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.
Talk to you later.